Hi, I'm Charlie, and if you're watching this, it means my 1999 Canon actually shoots video. I haven't put a video up on YouTube in a long time, but for the past year, I've been collecting bottles, more specifically, bottles from the late 1800s, early 1900s, from various sites in my neighborhood. There's a lot of construction lately in the neighborhood, and I noticed that bottles were literally being left on the curb, or in back piles from excavations. So I started to pick them up, and then I started to scratch through some of the dirt and find some rather interesting stuff. So I thought, since I've been following a lot of other bottle diggers online, that I would share a few of my finds here today. I'm going to start out with something that I enjoy finding, which is the inks. Inkwells come in various styles over the years. They've changed quite a bit. We have first a little clay ink pot, which is earthenware, probably 1870s or so. It's very small, as you can see, small opening, as you can see. It's got a very nice little finish on it. Unfortunately, there is a blemish on the back, but it is mostly intact. This came out of a home excavation that was mostly fill. I have two umbrella inks here today. One is a very small one, and you can see it's rather wonky, definitely blown in a mold, hand crafted. The neck doesn't sit quite level on there, but they call these, for the obvious reason, they appear like an umbrella inks. This is a slightly larger one. These were popular around the 1860s, 70s, up to about 1880 or so. Don't quote me on exact years. I know you guys know way more about bottles and glass than I do, but post-Civil War, let's say. We have a small cone ink here, also blown in a mold. You can see that the seam ends here, right above the ring. Could also have been a mucilage or glue, depending. If it were that, it would have had a little wand with a brush that would fit inside. This was an unusual one that I found recently. You could still see some of the ink residue inside. It was a deep purple or indigo. That's kind of a thin cone ink. I'm told, after posting some pictures online, that this could have been a Midwestern style, also blown in the mold. Just a cute little bottle. This came out of a sidewall of a construction excavation. It's a square ink with kind of angled corners. Looks like a little house with a big chimney. It's clear glass, so I'm assuming it's a little later, maybe around 1900, 1910. These cones tend to be 1890s, 1880s and 90s, and then they got square, and then they got to the more conventional inks. So I also wanted to show you, I've only found two what they call master inks, which is the larger ink bottle that you fill these from. One is this Carter's, which is kind of interesting in that you don't see too many of the Carter's inks in this green and in this small size. Carter's is also written on there vertically, so you can see it that way. It's on there vertically. So again, in a pile of ash, stew bones, oyster shells, the kind of things you find in fill, in very light, fluffy earth. And this is a Caws, C-A-W-S, also a master ink, larger, and nice aqua, also blown in the mold. Seam stops before the lip, and it's a Caws master ink. I have a bunch more inks, but they all fall into these sorts of categories. The most popular I have is the cone inks and the mucilage, which frequently has a second ring here. But that's pretty much it. Mostly I just wanted to test out my equipment, see if it still works. I'll talk briefly a bit about what these bottles are here as well, just because they're here. This was the first hutch that I found. I actually found this in the berm of a construction site. This was kicked aside and left. It was a surface find. It is a John A. Boyle beverages, and they had a bottling plant here in Philadelphia on Catherine Street. The address is conveniently embossed on the bottle. It's full of wonderful imperfections. It's got some very nice bubbles in it. It did not have the Hutchinson seal intact, but it's a hefty bottle and well worth collecting. People love Hutches. A couple other things. I just wanted to show you this one. This is an 8-sided Conner and Maroney Weiss beer. It would had the address on Carpenter Street, also in Philadelphia, embossed in the mold on one of the panels. 8-sided blob top. Lip here is applied. Separate gather of glass is wrapped around the bottle after it comes out of the mold, and it forms the lip, hence the blob. Very popular in the 1870s, 1880s or so. 60s, 70s. It kind of went out. It went to the tooled lip a little later on. This is one of those medicine bottles that I love to find. Pretty large to find this one intact. I actually found 2 of these. It's a Radways Resolvent. Not rare, just cool to find. They were both in the same site, and they tumbled out of the fill together. So, yeah, it's just one of those old nostrums, those old cures that we're not really sure actually cured anything. This was an interesting bottle. I found this in North Philly at an excavation. It had been tossed aside. It was a surface find. I almost discarded it because it has a crown top, and I thought it was a modern beer. But it turns out, as I looked at it, it is an Arnholt and Schaefer, and the seam stops here, so it was a tooled crown top, which means it was still blown in the mold. So probably after 1892 or so, but still handmade bottle, still blown in the mold. Nice little crest on it, which is what drew my eye to it, which I didn't think it was modern. It was a good pickup. And last but not least, I found this beautiful olive oil, likely imported, very crudely applied lip, lots of waving, and there's some stretching here in the glass, twist marks, that sort of thing. It had an applied seal. Mitchell and Fletcher, they were a importer of gourmet foods in Philadelphia. They probably would have imported this either with their seal on it or bottled the olive oil here. It would have arrived in kegs and been bottled here under the Mitchell and Fletcher name. There are lots of these around with different manufacturers listed on their embossed in their seals, but it looks to be an applied seal. So again, a separate gather of glass, stamped and then applied to the bottle after the bottle was crafted. So that's it. It's just a pretty quick sampling of just a few of the bottles that I have. If this works out, if people are interested, if I get some likes, some subscribers, I can go back and get some more out of my collection. I have several hundred bottles. And we can talk about beers and miniatures and sodas and ACLs or whatever you guys want to talk about. But that's it for now, and I'll see you on the comeback.